Yes.
Numbers are still going up. Charlotte, if you can hear me, can you give me a nod when you've admitted everybody that's in the waiting room, please?
Still coming in, Tracy.
Three in at the moment.
That's great, thank you. We're up to 85, so that's good. Pretty much done now. Okay, that's great. I think we'll make a start. So an absolutely massive warm welcome to everybody this morning on Tuesday, the 22nd of November. I say that because it's sort of a bit of a moment, isn't it, that we're heading thick and fast into Christmas time. But whether you've got your tree up or not yet, I don't know. They seem to be going up earlier and earlier amongst my friends group. So yeah, looking forward to it. But on behalf of HPMA, a really warm welcome. My name's Tracy Hill, and I work as part of the HPMA team with Charlotte, who's with us today, and Joe and Nikki Ingen. And we're absolutely delighted to have Nick and Chris with us this morning from Delve that are going to spend an hour with us discussing courageous conversations. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to Nick and just say enjoy. Okay, thanks ever so much, Nick.
Brilliant, thanks Tracy. Welcome everybody. Really, sorry, I got muted then for some reason. Am I unmuted now?
You're
welcome
good.
Everyone, I'll start again. It's so lovely to see so many of you on this session this morning, and I hope you find it really useful. And if you're still a little bit wobbly about having those really tricky conversations, I'm hoping that you're in the right place. So obviously I'm Nick from Delve, and this is Chris, my colleague here from Delve as well, who we're just going to guide you through the session this morning. So I'm just going to share my slides and make sure everybody can see them. And I've got a fancy slide that I just want to try out. So let me share my screen with you. Okay, bear with me one moment. Let me get this up and running. So if you can all see my screen, yeah, look what we've done to our logo. It's very fancy. Oops. That was good, wasn't it? It didn't actually go through. Okay, so as I said, today's session is all about courageous conversations. All I ask of you, of everybody here, is if you can make sure that you stay on mute. You just throughout. We're not going to be asking you to come off mic and participate because we haven't got enough time, but we will be asking you to participate via the chat, and we will have a quick poll just for fun, not a serious poll, but just for fun in a few moments. So that's the only thing you're going to have to do. The rest of the time you just sit back, relax, and hopefully get some great tools and food for thought around how to make difficult, or what you see as tricky, conversations a little bit easier. We start with reframing that. Like, let's think about them as courageous conversations and think about the end game that we're trying to achieve. So the things that we're going to explore are things like what what makes these things undiscussable? What makes them, why do we call them the undiscussables? What makes it so hard? We're also going to have a little think about, okay, so what do we do? Different perspectives. How do we start? How can we prepare for these difficult conversations in the best way? And one of the tricks is not to over prepare. But we'll touch very lightly on emotional intelligence and thinking about how we build that trust. And then finally, what are some of the skills that we can do to bring about that change in behaviour, whether it's or reinforcing positive behaviour. Just think about some techniques around what makes feedback effective. So just really quickly, who are we at Delve? Well, we truly believe that every leader has it within their gift to inspire and support someone to thrive at work. You know, nobody should be going home feeling drained after work because of other people or because of the way they've been led. It's within their gift to do that. And we really, that is our passion and our vision, to take that to the end of the road, to make sure people are capable of taking an inclusive approach to talent and developing their teams in a meaningful way. We do lots of different things, but we truly believe that all of this is achieved one conversation at a time. Everything you can achieve can be achieved through a conversation. So just to give you a little bit of idea of our values and what's important to us, and this is obviously what you can expect from working with us this morning. If you've not been on a Delve session before, you know, we just want you to sit back and relax. We'll take you on a bit of a journey, and if you do want to tweet, obviously there's a HPMA tweet as well that you'll be all familiar with, and that's our Twitter handle as well. So it'd be nice to hear from you, so do follow us. So let's just start having a little think about what toxicity looks like in our teams. And we at Delve spend a lot of time supporting teams who have become dysfunctional and need to recalibrate. And I suppose you do as well. You know, if you're in a HR professional sort of arena or role, most of the time we are dealing with problems. We are dealing when teams are not being effective. And what never fails to surprise me is how quickly teams begin to accept toxic behaviours as the norm. And I just wanted to start with a little story about an NHS team that I worked with. And I was running a team building session. And it was really about thinking about new ways of working. There'd been a lot of change going on in the team. And we started the session, and then somebody arrived 20 minutes late. And for the purpose of this story, we're going to call her Betty. So Betty walked in, didn't apologise, just sat down, got out her phone. Her body language gave me and everybody else a clear message that she didn't want to be there. So I observed this, and I got to the break and I thought, I'll ask the manager, because the manager was in the room. I'll ask her about Betty. And her response was, oh yeah, that's typical Betty, always late, never says hello. And then once she's had a 5 cigarettes and 10 coffees, she comes round. So I thought, okay. So I left it there for a moment, carried on with the session. And I noticed that every time someone came up with a new idea, Betty would either shrug, roll her eyes, tut, or she'd be more vocal and say that that's never going to work. No one in the room seemed to be challenging it either. It was really bizarre. So at the end of the session, I asked to speak to Betty, and I told her what I'd noticed during the session. And I had that courageous conversation. I talked about the consequences. So I talked about the wider impact on the rest of the team, and that she'd given me the impression that she was very unhappy in the team. And I asked for her reflections so we could talk about what support she needed. Well, it went terribly wrong. It didn't go well at all. She told me I had no right to speak to her like that. And then brought in a horrible personal experience that she'd had a few years back that was impacting her mental health. And it was horrible. And I immediately regretted having the conversation, because there was a mention of a grievance. And I thought, oh God, I wish I'd never said anything now. But I didn't back down. And my intention, really, when you come back to your purpose, what is my purpose? What is my intention behind having this difficult conversation? Was to support that team and that person in the best possible way. So cut a long story short, about 3 months later, I was working in the same trust, and I saw Betty walking towards me, and I braced myself for a bit of a fight. So I was like, oh no, here she comes. And as she got closer, I saw that she was smiling, and she thanked me for calling it out that day and explained that she'd now got a new job and was loving it. And although it had gone terribly wrong in my eyes, actually it had planted a seed and really helped somebody to make the change that they needed to make, because they were clearly unhappy in the team. So I wanted to share that with you, because it's so easy to think about, oh God, is it worth it? You know, where do I begin with these difficult conversations? And you're not alone. What makes it so hard? Well, according to the Chartered Management Institute, managers feel, 66% of managers feel anxious about tricky conversations. So when we think of the consequences of not having them, avoiding or delaying a difficult conversation, this can hurt your relationships and create other negative outcomes. So it may not feel natural at first. And let's face it, it may never feel natural at first. And especially if you're the sort of person who doesn't like conflict and you prefer harmony, you might never, ever, ever feel comfortable with the undiscussables. But what you can do is learn to dive into these tough talks by, first of all, reframing your thoughts. So we're going to look at where do we begin with this. But just before we do, I'd really like if we could just have a quick poll. And I'm hoping Charlotte can open this up. I'll just stop sharing for a second. Charlotte, are you okay to launch that poll, or do you want me to? Let's see if I can do it. Oh, I can do it. It's okay. Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte. Okay, so can everyone see that poll on this? It's only for fun. It's not like it's not got a proper evaluation kind of for things. It's just a little bit of fun to get us started. How are you all feeling about having courageous conversations? Okay, it's starting to slow down. Just a few more to vote.
Yeah, that's everyone, I think. Oh no, pardon. Just a couple more, I think.
I think we'll end it there, Charlotte, if that's all right, and just share the poll. Okay, so we can see there. Chris, do you want to take us through what are your thoughts on courageous conversations?
Yeah, sure. So what I noticed first of all was that there are 5 people who would rather swallow a nest of wasps, which we smiled when we put that in as an option, but there we go. But majority in the second and third, I'd overthink it for a week, but I would give it a go. Get that, done that in the past. I'm not comfortable, but I would get the job done, so slightly lower. And then just 2, actually we'll deal with it head on, totally confident.
I'm not sure what I might be able to teach you, that those 2 people on this session today, but hopefully it'll reassure you that you are doing the right thing. So so that's really interesting. And you know, the amount of courageous conversations I've had in my career so far, it never gets easier, I'll be honest. But what I try to do is just not overthink it, because that's the danger we make, because then we're focusing more on what we're saying rather than listening. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. So brilliant. Thanks for participating in that. So I will just share my slides again. And let's think about where we take it. Where do we start? Where, you know, what's a great place to start in terms of framing how we think about these courageous conversations. So I suppose just step 1 is really begin from a place of curiosity and respect, and most importantly, stop worrying about being liked. You know, conflict avoiders are often worried about the likability factor. And obviously it's natural to want to be liked, but it's not always the important thing. We need to lean into the conversation with an open attitude, genuine desire to learn, and do what we need to do. But start with that. I'm curious about why this is happening. So with Betty, I was curious why she was so unhappy in the team. I was curious about why she was behaving in that way. And when we begin from that place, we keep an open mind and we're not sort of headed into that conflict space. And genuine respect and vulnerability typically produce more of the same: mutual respect and shared vulnerability. So even when the subject matter is difficult, conversations can remain mutually supportive. So if we respect the other person's point of view, you can expect them to respect yours. Okay, so that's the starting point. The second thing we need to do is focus on what we're hearing and not what you are saying. So you think people who shy away from conflict often spend a huge amount of time mentally rewording their thoughts or words, practicing what they're going to say. And although it might feel like really useful preparation, ruminating over what to say can hijack your mind for the entire workday, and sometimes even late into the night. I'm sure there's other people that wake up at 3 in the morning and start thinking about what you're going to say the next day at a tough conversation. But the thing is, the tough conversations rarely go as planned anyway, and that's the thing we've just got to prepare for. So take the pressure off yourself. You don't actually need to talk that much during a difficult conversation. So instead, really focus on listening, reflecting, and observing. And here's a little example. So if a team member has missed another deadline, approach them with really neutral, supportive questions. So I can see the project is behind schedule. Tell me about the challenges that you're facing. And then really just stop talking and listening. So you only really need to prepare that first neutral question. It's not loaded, it's just curiosity, it's respectful, you want to listen to what they've got to say. So the real trick here is just be that interested person, be proactive, gather as much detail as possible, and then ask those follow-up questions without blame. So it's really, that's just a little question that's step 2. Step 3 is be direct, get to the point. So really address uncomfortable situations by just getting to the point. There's no point, pussyfooting around a situation. Have that frank, respectful discussion where both parties speak frankly about the details of the issue. And talking with people honestly and with respect creates those mutually rewarding relationships that we've just mentioned, even when the conversations are difficult. There are situations, however, where there might be cultural or personality differences, and you should consider that. So if you haven't got that kind of culture within your team, if you haven't got that level of psychological safety, then that directness might be feeling quite alien and might feel very, very uncomfortable for people. So just really consider, the culture has this, are we all direct with each other? Is that the culture, or is it something entirely different? A colleague of mine once told me that she'd received some feedback, and at the end the manager said, "I'm so glad you've taken this so well." But my colleague had no clue what the feedback was. So this manager felt like they'd had this conversation and got to the point, but hadn't entirely got to the point, and left somebody thinking, I don't really know what that was all about. So step 3, be direct. And then step 4, don't put it off. How often is your response to something conflicting with, I don't want to talk about it, or it's not that big a deal, or it's not worth arguing about, or choose your battles. If you're always promising yourself that you'll bring it up next time it happens, well, now's the time. So instead of putting the conversation off for some ideal future time, when it can be more easily dealt with, tackle it right away. Get your cards on the table so you can resolve the issue and then move on. And it might seem risky to come right out and say something, but often that's just what's needed. And then give yourself or the person that you're talking to a little bit of time to cool down if necessary. Plan the general outline of what you want to convey and the outcome that you desire. But then have the conversation, make a plan and move on. Because after all the mental gymnastics of endlessly practicing conversations in your head, actually engaging in a two-way conversation can be really inspiring. It can be productive. So that's just something to think about as well. And then step 5, our last step to really think about where our mindset is at, is expect a positive outcome. Don't catastrophize. Sometimes we think this conversation is going to be awful, and then we approach it in a way that isn't at our best selves, and it ends up being awful. And obviously, just don't tell yourself it's going to be a disaster. Really think about this is going to result in somebody getting some great feedback, change their behaviour, and an improved relationship. So really focus on the desired outcome with this. Focus on the long-term gains that you'll create for your relationship. And don't ignore the tough situations that you're aware of today. When the opportunity presents itself, just deal with it head on. Okay. And we've just given you, we've got a handout that you can log on at the end and get, but we just wanted to give you some reflection questions really about the tough conversations that you might have to have generally. You know, when you think about it, how often are you putting thought into what your goals are with people that you talk to? So just even if you're in a meeting, you know, what do I want to say? What's my intention behind what I want to say? What do I want to achieve by having this conversation? And intention's an important factor. And then just think about your levels of conflict and what, you know, what's going on for you. How often do you say things you don't mean just to be polite? How many meetings have you been in where you knew the real issues were not being discussed, but you've just let it slide? What issues do you avoid talking about at home and at work? And when was the last time you really said what you thought and felt? So these are just some reflective questions to just think, how forthright am I being with my assertiveness levels and having these conversations? So one of the things we need to think about is that there are actually 3 things we need to achieve when we're preparing. So the first thing is being clear on your perspective. So we really need to think about what we want from the conversation. What is our intention? What are we trying to achieve? Exactly for those reflective questions that we've just gone through. What's our intention behind the conversation? And then try to find out as much as you can about their situation. Okay, what's their perspective? If you put yourself in their shoes, try and imagine with empathy. Okay, so really put yourself, what might be driving this behavior? For Betty, something horrible had happened to her in the last few years, which was impacting on her behavior at work, and she genuinely needed support to deal with that. So have a think about their perspective. What's driving this behavior? What's the overlap? What might you have in common, for example? Well, actually, you might both have a desire to see an end to the situation. So what are the commonalities that sit in the middle? So we're going to come back to this at each point to go, let's think, right, okay, my perspective, their perspective, what's the overlap? So what we're going to start with is you. So let's start with you. Let's think about how we need to consider before taking any action, how we might come across, or how our words might impact our timing and so on. So while I've been saying just have the conversation as soon as possible, timing is really, really important. So I never forget, in a previous role, my manager came to me on a Friday evening as I was leaving work and telling me that there were going to be huge changes in the team that was going to impact all of us, how we'd be meeting first thing Monday to discuss it further. And no doubt that manager was, you know, they felt as though they were being really upfront, open, transparent and honest, and probably felt better for getting it off her chest on a Friday afternoon. But the timing was terrible. So I spent the whole weekend worrying about it. So this is where we're going to start exploring our style, what triggers an emotional response in us, and what our intentions are, and the levels of trust that we're working with. So you may have seen this before, but this is a really nice way of looking at emotional intelligence. And it is the key to all of this. So it's made up of 4 core skills that pair up under 2 primary competencies. So you can see there, there's personal competence, and then there's also social competence. So personal competence is made up of our self-awareness and also our self-management skills, which focus more on you individually than your interactions with other people. So self-awareness is your ability to accurately perceive your emotions and stay aware of them as they happen. So just thinking about Sarah, my colleague, business partner, one's got some feedback that she looks really disinterested in meetings. It was a great piece of feedback, actually, because she didn't realise how her face was coming across in meetings. So she was completely unaware of it, but everybody else was looking at her thinking, well, God, she looks really bored, or am I saying something wrong? So sometimes we need to be really self-aware, but we also need to do that self-management side as well. Knowing your triggers, what influences particularly strong emotions in you, and exploring any patterns. So it can be quite unpredictable, can't it, sometimes? So it's just being very, very aware. And obviously the self-management is our ability to use that to stay flexible and positively direct our own behaviour to make those changes. So, for example, you might be aware that you get angry or feel angry quite easily, but it's also important that you can recognise and manage those feelings. So my husband, driving a car, nightmare, absolute nightmare. He gets so angry with other drivers. So he knows this is happening, he's very self-aware. He has no self-management, so he can't, it's like emotional leakage. It just leaks out all over the car and we're all going, oh, for God's sake. So it's important to be aware, but also to manage those feelings as well. And then you've got social competence, and that's made up of your social awareness and also your relationship management. And it's your ability to understand other people's moods and behaviours and motives in order to improve the quality of your relationships. So social awareness, can you pick up the mood in the room very easily? Can you pick up another people's emotions? I did an emotional intelligence assessment not so long ago, and it turns out I'm not very good at this, if I'm honest. This was something I needed to develop, but obviously with emotional intelligence, you can develop it. Unlike other types of intelligence, you can develop this. So if you feel like this needs a little bit of work, it is perfectly possible. And then your relationship management is obviously just using these cues to sort of build those effective working relationships with others. So whether it's showing and expressing feelings, showing empathy, and sharing those feelings as well. So this is something we really need to think about, because, you know, the more emotional intelligence you have, the more you work on this, the better those courageous conversations are going to be. The other thing we need to consider, and this is an oldie, you know, we don't touch on this anymore, but I find this absolutely fascinating. So if you've come across this before, it's Eric Berne, and it's called transactional analysis. And he talks about the 3 ego states that exist within all of us. And we've got the parent. So each one of us will have all 3 of these with us, and we draw on them at different times, depending on triggers, depending on the situation. So the parent in us, as you would expect from a parent, it can be that it's almost like the sport concept. So it can either be nurturing, so that person that goes, come on, get under my wing, I'll support you, I'll help you, or it can be quite controlling. And, you know, we need to think about obviously what that looks like when we're having conversations. The second one is the reasonable learned concept. So this is the person that's objective, the stable. That example I shared earlier about the you know, what problems are you facing? The open, neutral question was very adult. It wasn't judging. It wasn't, you've not finished this, why not? And then lastly, you've got the child concept. So the child can be in all of us. It can be free and creative. It could be the person that goes, let's go to the pub after work and have a, you know, or let's get the Christmas tree up, or whatever it is that you define as fun. Or it could be an adapted child where they're a bit sulky, and, you know, and all transactional analysis means really is that your brain acts like a camcorder, if you like. The camcorders even still exist. I'm probably using very old terminology there, but everything that happens is vividly recorded. And some things you remember, and some things that sit in your subconscious, and they could just be like triggers. And I'll never forget, early on, I was having a meeting with my manager a few years back when I was early on in my career, and we were going through some budgets, and he kind of just pointed at some maths on a piece of paper and said, what's and he tapped the paper with his finger, what's 300 times whatever it was? And it triggered something in me, and the child came out, oh, I don't know, what are you asking me for? Yeah, I was like, what? Where did that come from? That was really bizarre. And when I think about sort of as a child, I hated maths so much. I used to cry at the thought of my maths lessons. So it's really, we don't know why we behave in certain ways. So this is something that's really, really important to consider when you're actually speaking to people. What mode are they in? And I've got an example for you here. So, you know, we start off, hey, did you finish that report yet? I have to email it over to the exec team tomorrow. I'd like to read it first. What do we think that is? I'd say that's pretty adult, you know, so we've got somebody being very reasonable and logical in that first part of the conversation. However, it triggers something, because when the person responding says, why are you always reminding me? I said I'll get it done, and I will. Okay, so very much in child mode. And then because that person has gone into that mode, it's very hard to stay in that adult space. So then we trigger into parent mode. Look, I really need it, make it happen. By the way, kind of attitude is completely unnecessary. So you can see how quickly the conversation can go awry. And then obviously back in child mode, because somebody's been in parent, well, I've got a lot of stuff on, but I'll guess I'll get it done. So you can see how easy it is to get off track with our conversations. So it's something, again, I did say it was going to be light touch, worth reading about if you've not visited this for a while, because it can really help you build very effective relationships. And by the way, everyone, if anyone has some great tips to share, please pop them in chat. You know, Chris is keeping an eye on the chat, so at any point, I can't actually see the chat, so at any point, if you want to share something that would be really useful to everyone else, please don't hesitate, because it's always nice to learn from colleagues as well. So let's just start by, again, so we've kind of looked at sort of the basics, the foundations of how we need to prepare our mindset. We've looked at emotional intelligence, we've looked at transactional analysis. These are all light touch, but all things that are super, super important when we're trying to prepare to have great conversations. And the other thing we need to consider is the level of trust within a relationship. So the higher the level, the more likely you are to have a successful outcome, because people will trust what you're saying. And to demonstrate, if you think about trust, I mean, let's think about a surgeon by your bedside. So she visits your bedside before your operation. She talks to you and you realise that you've had similar upbringing. She connects with you in what she believes, shows her integrity. And she really shows that she's acting in your best interests and you really like her. However, this is the first time they've ever carried out this operation. So there's no past track record of success. Do you trust her? Is it enough not to have reassurance of someone's competency? Or like we flip that over, she visits you before your operation and she's rude, arrogant, doesn't take any time to build a relationship with you. But after she leaves, the nurse tells you that she's carried this operation out 1,000 times before, has an excellent track record. Do you trust her? Is it enough that if you don't like somebody's character? So it's a really interesting dilemma, because with that, I imagine, you know, you want somebody who's got the track record. But in relationships at work, there are 4 things that matter. So in the example of the surgeon, he probably doesn't, because you just want the job done. But if you're going to have a longer term relationship with somebody, it's a real mix of character. So the bits that others can't really see, but they can feel, and competence. So it's good to break down all 4 components. So reflecting on your own values and intent. So the intent is really important. Again, I was talking to somebody not long ago who had come into a session with us and had complained about a colleague who he'd seen parking outside the school gates inappropriately. So he'd parked on the lines, basically. He was probably just dropping his child off. And he was very angry about it, and he was coming at it with it's not right, those children are at risk, he was putting children at danger. So, but when we explored it with him, his intent wasn't to stop children being in danger. His intent was to humiliate his colleague, because he didn't really get on with his colleague. So the way he was going about it wasn't about, his intent wasn't what we thought. Does that make sense? So you know, we think about, why am I having this conversation? Really dig deep and think, is there a genuine concern for this other person? Am I seeking mutual benefits? Am I acting in the best interest of everyone? And the way you then do it will be the right way if you really consider those things. So it's got to come from that place. It's got to come from a place of with the right intent, a place of integrity, but also people need to be reassured about our capability and our results that we've achieved. When you've got all 4 of those things, that's what makes it work. Another thing to think about in terms of building strong relationships is that you do have to care personally. And this can be as simple as showing enough vulnerability to admit that you're having a bad day. and creating a safe space for others to do the same. So since you've learned to talk, you've likely been told some version of, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And then you become the boss. And the very thing you've been taught not to do since you're about 18 months old is suddenly your job. So in order to succeed, you have to challenge directly. Challenging people is often the best way to show that you care. It doesn't mean, and you know, think about the compassionate leadership session as well. It's not about not challenging and not having those difficult conversations. And it doesn't, you know, it does not mean that whatever you think is the truth. It means that it just means that you share your sometimes humble opinions directly. So if the vertical axis is caring personally, and the horizontal axis here on this model, you can see is challenging directly, you want your feedback to fall in the upper right-hand quadrant. So this is where our, you know, the radical candor lies. And if you think about some of those other areas, so obnoxious aggression, brutal honesty, or front stabbing, as it's sometimes called, when you challenge somebody directly, but you don't show that you care about them personally. Or it could be praise that doesn't feel sincere, or criticism and feedback that isn't delivered kindly. So we don't want to get that. We don't want to be in that space. And the other spaces there. So you've got that, you know, what happens when you want to spare someone's short-term feelings. So you don't tell them something that they really, really need to know. You care personally, but you fail to challenge directly. So it's praise that isn't specific enough to help that person understand what was good, or criticism that's sugar-coated and unclear. People will not know how to change their behaviour as a result of that. And a manipulative insincerity, so backstabbing, political, passive-aggressive behaviour is what happens when you neither care personally or challenge directly. So that, you know, this is a great model to just think, you know, reflect on the conversations that you have to have, but also reflect on the culture that you have, in terms of, you know, where are you? Are people, is there enough, it does link massively to psychological safety. Is there enough of that radical candor to be going on? Because otherwise, a relationship without trust is like having a phone with no service. And what do? We play games, okay? So this is something we need to consider. So let's go back to this. As we continue to work our way through, let's think, we've explored our perspective, how we might be landing messages, how our ego state, maybe which ego state may be dominant. We've looked very briefly at the cross transactions that can take place, but also as well, science behind trust. And the next thing we need to consider is where the other person is coming from, so their perspective. So let's think about how people tick. Our job here is to help them look in the mirror, not poke them in the eye. So when we try to explore someone else's perspective, we need to think about reframing techniques and tools that help us deal with those people who we sometimes perceive as difficult. The first thing to remember is that the temperature of conflict with two people or within a team needs to be just right. And we've got hot conflict, which is fairly obvious, people shouting and screaming. And then you've got cold conflict, which is maybe passive aggressiveness, people muttering under the breath, pursing the lips, physically withdrawn. So all the things that you might see in a team with low levels of psychological safety. And actually, we need to warm that up. We need to cool down the hot conflict, but we need to warm up the cold conflict. And it's a great, if you've ever come across Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, the conflict is a major factor within there, and it has to be at the right temperature. So that's one thing we need to consider. And just think about what passive aggressive looks like. You know, not shared an honest view on a topic, even when you've been asked. You know, you got upset with someone, but you didn't let them know. There's probably loads of examples that we can share here, but procrastinating on completing something because you don't see the value in it. You know, not finishing a report because you didn't know, or praise someone in public, criticize them in private. All these behaviors are detrimental to, well, they're destructive, sorry, to a team environment. And if we think about how we break down the characters in our team, and this is just for a little bit of fun, but if you imagine, you know, your team as a ship, We've got the teddy bear in the corner there. That represents our passengers. So passengers are very positive, but do nothing about it. So they're the people that, you know, say all the right things in meetings, but very rarely actually do anything about it. They very rarely think about supporting you in the right way. Then we've got your crew members. Okay, so your crew members are people who very much are, they've got your back, they step up, they, you know, if you go on holiday, they'll run the ship for you, they're positive, and they do lots about it. Then we've got our pirates. Now, our pirates are negative, but do lots. Okay, so the pirates are very much people who challenge a lot, but maybe not in the right way. Pirates recruit other pirates. You know, we often, I've been a pirate. If I'm perfectly honest, I have been a pirate at some point in my career, where it's usually come from a place of not being led in the right way, or my values being compromised, and it's made me act out in a way that I'm not proud of, but actually I've been very challenging to teams. So it's thinking about who are our crew members, who are our pirates, who are our passengers, and then finally, oh, if we could just pop everybody on mute, that'd be great, thank you. So and finally, we've got the freight, and the freight are negative but do nothing about it. And we really need to throw the freight off the ship, if I'm honest, but we tend not to do that. But think about all of these people in your team, how the difference between the freight and the pirates have passion, they have energy. You know, so it's really important that difficult conversations or courageous conversations happen with those pirates to understand why are they behaving that way. Because when you turn a pirate around, they become the best crew members you've ever had. So it's don't shy away from those pirates. Try to understand, begin from a place of curiosity and respect, find out why they're behaving that way, and really challenge it. Other types of people we've got to think about: angries, you know, people who just seem to be angry. It could be hot, cold, or neutral. You know, the things that we shouldn't do is ignore them. We should be showing that we are listening. The worst thing we can do is tell someone to calm down, because that will just heat it up even more. There's a really good technique called the fogging technique. So it's very simple, and all it starts, if somebody's angry with you, all you need to do is go, yes. And it's the word yes that's really important. You go, yes, and then you take a big pause. I can see why you're upset about that. And it immediately diffuses the situation. So it's the yes, which tricks the brain into thinking you're agreeing with them, but you're not. You're actually just showing empathy. I can see why you're upset about that. But then you can go into that conversation in a safer space because it's cooled down a little bit. So it's a really good technique to use. We've also got blamers. So really think about what's going on with your culture. That's the first place I'd look. You know, what happens normally when things don't go to plan? You know, focus on the future, what needs to happen next, and give people time to think. So blamers find it hard to accept responsibility for what they've done. And we often sense that tightness or even panic in the person who's denying all responsibility. So you have to deal with the panic and the avoidance as well as the situation. And sometimes this is because the other person finds it very hard to externalize what's happened. They take it very personally. That what's happened is something that they've done, that it's been their fault. So that's why they blame other things. So it's a reflection of who they are. So they find it very, very difficult to say, I got that wrong. And that might be down to the culture. It might be because they've suffered punishments in the past because of the mistakes. So really explore what's going on there if you've got those kind of people or that kind of behavior in your team. And then your negatives. Oh, I love negative people. I honestly, you know, if you think about it, they are the best people to consult at the start of a project. Be grateful for them. Look at it as a new light. Their insights could be invaluable. So it's important here that we don't take it personally. Like, ask, you know, if you're at the start of a new way of working or start of a project, get them in the room from day one. What are the pitfalls? What might stop this from working? you know, and we have to be realistic. You're not going to expect the same level of enthusiasm from everybody. And the best you might get is a not really when you ask. So if you pay attention to all of these things, is there any other reason why this can't succeed? The best you might get is a not really. But you know, these people are so useful in our teams. You know, that some people are glass half full, and let's accept that and use their strength in the right way. And the last thing, or just really before we sort of move on, is thinking about why people behave as they do. And we often use this onion model because it really helps you to structure your conversation and keep it in the safe space. So when we think about, you know, giving somebody a piece of feedback, and, you know, if it attacks, I'll share my own piece of feedback. I once received a horrible piece of feedback from a senior person who had said I wasn't professional. And this piece of feedback destroyed me, like absolutely. For about 5 years, it sat on my shoulder like a gremlin. So, and it changed my behavior. And I was like, right, okay, I'm not going to speak up in this meeting because I'm unprofessional. And professionalism was one of my values. I really, really valued it more than anything else. So the feedback was horrible. Now, the reason it was horrible is because it attacked my values and personality, and I couldn't actually change that. I couldn't change it. One, it wasn't constructive enough to know what it was I'd done, but also I didn't know how to change who I was. So when we keep the feedback on the outside of the onion, so if that feedback, let's reframe it. Okay, Nick, when you said that, just be careful. It sounded unprofessional, and we really need to think about, you know, the reputation in the team. Let's think about how we might reframe that for next time. Perfect feedback. It's not an attack on me personally, but it's something I can do to change. Oh, right, I get it. Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. Let's think about how we can reword it. So feedback is a gift, and it can destroy people. So we've got to be very, very careful about how we give that feedback. If you stay in that outer space in that onion, you can't go wrong. You really can't. If we start making it about, you need to show more initiative, what does that even mean? You need to be more strategic. What does that mean? It kind of attacks who we are, and we can't do anything about it. So again, we've looked at our perspective, how we land, their perspective. We've looked at some tools that help us frame that feedback. The onion model is exactly that. It's a great one, as is this one. So actually putting feedback, framing what you do want, what you don't want. So I have 2 teenage boys who are, you know, well, you can imagine I get home from work and his shoes everywhere, everything's dumped, everything's all over the place. And it's very easy to go into nag mode, to say, right, you never unload the dishwasher, you never put your shoes away, you never do this, and they just shut down, you know. And I try to practice what I preach really with this. And instead now I say in the morning, okay, what I want to see when I get home is I want the dishwasher unloaded, I want the dog walked, and I want all shoes in the cupboard. Yeah, and your voice changes, everything about it changes. You're telling people what you expect, not just listing all the bad things that they don't do. So when you're thinking about feedback, really think about what is it you want to see, maximize those future desirable behaviors, and obviously minimize what's going on right now. So what is it, if somebody's always late, what I need you to see, what I need to see is that you arrive on time before 9 o'clock, ready to start, you know, just really flipping it over, because that can have a huge, huge impact. And then I just wanted to share a little useful plan, really, of, you know, we've talked about not over preparing, but obviously we just want to make sure that you do have a little bit of structure. So always start with describing what you saw. So what have you noticed? What have you seen? With Betty, I described what I saw in that team session. What's your view? Okay, what's happened? You know, encourage that self-reflection following your description. Then also describe the consequences, because there will be consequences, and this can be used for positive feedback as well. You know, when we're having these conversations, it does, you know, courageous conversations, we're assuming that they are very difficult, but it can be used for positive feedback. describe the consequences. Well, this has meant that other people have not been able to do this, or this has meant that our team reputation, or whatever it might be. Describe those consequences, and then agree a plan. How can we sort this out? What support do you need? Let's talk about a few ways we can change this. And if somebody isn't forthcoming, because most people will recognize their own behavior and say, yeah, actually, you know, I could change. But if they don't, point them in the right direction. Well, okay, I'd like you to try this, or you might try that. So it's just a nice little structure really to help us frame our courageous conversations, but always bear in mind that people might not hear the feedback, and that might be for many reasons. So they might not hear the negative feedback because it might be a shock. Again, coming back to exploring your culture, if it's not, they're not used to it. So if you're a new leader and you've taken over a new team, or even if you're not the leader and you're in a new team, just really think about how does feedback flow? Does it flow upwards, downwards, sideways? And if it doesn't, then there may be an added element of difficulty when you're trying to have courageous conversations. So there's lots of reasons why people might not hear it. And there's lots of reasons why people might not hear positive feedback if they don't think it's genuine, or it's not important, or it's not real, or they might be a little bit embarrassed, or they might be waiting for the but. We all know the you know what sandwich does not work. We don't want to do that sandwich ever, because it just takes away from the feedback they need to hear. So I'm hoping that when we think about all the things we've gone through, our mindset, starting from that place of curiosity and respect, and being direct as much as we can, but getting our timing right, you know, there's also an added element of the power dynamic. So if you are a leader having a conversation with somebody, remember that you might not, again, psychological safety might mean they don't hear it, or they don't respond to it in the way that you want them to, because of that power dynamic. So there's just an extra thing that we need to really consider. So that is it, really. We've got a few minutes to spare, and I'm really happy to answer any questions that people may have. I'll stay on. We've finished slightly earlier than anticipated, and I'm sorry I talked about 100 miles an hour, but we're trying to fit it all in. But do get in touch and say hello. What I will do, I'll stop sharing and I'll just pop in the chat a link. If you want to get a little bit of a handout, you can. And we've got lots of things in the chat there, so thank you so much for participating in that. I'll just pop that link in, and if you want to grab the handout, please just do, and it just covers some of the key things that we've talked about this morning. Chris, anything to add while we've got a little bit of time?
No, I don't think so. I was just keeping tabs on the chat. Reference to the black hat. I think it's Edward de Bono's six thinking hats, and the fact that just really helpful to have that that role being played. So just really linking in with what you said around what we perceive as negatives. Actually, I've heard in a change context people like that known as defenders, because they're defending something that they believe is right, and if you're going to change it, there needs to be a good reason to change it.
That's a great term, actually.
That's
a nice way of reframing it, isn't it? And if you're a negative, you can now call yourself a defender. So that's a really nice way of putting it.
It's still important how people turn up with that, isn't it? But
yeah,
actually, so that was good to just experience, and I think that was the main thing. Tonya, thank you. I appreciated your comment. I didn't respond directly, but around the being clear around what you want and what you don't want.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Patrick Lencioni as well. There was just someone picking up on that. If you go on the YouTube, there's a great little 2-minute clip of him just sharing an outline of the 5 dysfunctions model. Is there with a flip chart. So if you're looking for it, it's literally 2 minutes, I think, but it's just a really nice introduction to it. It's one that we spend quite a bit of time working with. Brilliant. Oh, thanks, Chris, and thank you, everybody.
hopefully you've found it. It looks like it has been really useful in the chat there. So I'm really glad you found it useful. And obviously the recording is it on the HPMA website, Tracy?
Yeah, thanks ever so much. I was just going to come in because I know a couple of people have asked. The recording will be made available, yes, on the HPMA website. And as people have put in the chat, absolutely great session, guys. As always, I've got to say, when one of these is in my diary, I really look forward to it.
Thank you.
Because they always, you know, it's just an hour that we take out of the day, but they're always so stimulating. And I think that the richness in the time that we've been together this morning has been phenomenal. In terms of the ideas, the tips, the skills development, and the sharing as well that we've managed to do. So thank you once more. Really good. Whilst I've got colleagues still on the call, can I just alert you to, at the moment, the Learning Needs Analysis questionnaire from HPMA is out for completion. So if you go onto Twitter, there's a link on Twitter, but if you would please just take the time to complete that, because what that does is that gives us feedback on what you want, actually. So sessions such as this and other topics, you've got the opportunity to share back with me and central team colleagues what it is that you want us to put on over the next 12-month period, starting from April next year. All right, people that are not on Twitter, anything else? Yeah, what I will do is I'll make sure that a link is shared. That's Vicky that said that. I'll make sure that a link is shared for those colleagues that are not on Twitter. We have had some challenges with our comms coming out of HPMA central office. So my apologies for that. So I'll have a chat back with Joe and see what else we can do to get that out to you. So keep your eyes open for the link coming out to you, because it'd be great to hear from you. Or I guess alternatively, email us directly. So I'm tracy.hill@hpma.org.uk. So it's always great to hear from you. So I guess finally, just one enormous thank you once more. Thank you to Nick and to Chris, and thank you to yourselves for joining us. And I hope that you all have a great rest of the day. All right, then.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Be brave.
Yeah,
Bye, thanks, Tracy.
All right, then.
Thank you.
Thank you.